So, I'm going live, trying to get this thing out of the way here a little bit. There. So, hi there. I am live now with Michelle Barlond Smith, and we wanted to talk a little bit about the Michigan oil spill in Kalamazoo and other Michigan oil spill related things. So I guess with no further ado, I don't know, how do we start this? Because this is I mean, all of this is a touchy thing, and the reason that we got into contact in the first place is that's a touchy thing as well. So I'm having a hard time trying to figure out exactly the right way to talk about all this. Got any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you can really look at it as from a point of activism. What you're doing as an activist and why we do it. I have been doing this now since 2010, and I was not an activist prior to this. But it has been a long journey, and it's one that you have to look at very seriously, because people's lives are at stake in these situations. Whether it is citizens, whether it is fellow activists, and we need to be clear and transparent about it.
So I don't know. Maybe we should just get right to it. Obviously, the reason that we started talking about this was Chris Womhoff. Am I saying his name right? And he mentioned what was going on, or actually, well, I don't know if how the conversation got started exactly, but he had been in contact with one of my acquaintances from Standing Rock. And the discussion about John Bolenbaugh had come up, because John Bolenbaugh was, quite honestly, attacking me on social media, and quite viciously so. And so I guess this basically started because your association with John. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, I lived on the river when the oil spill happened. I lived about 200 feet from it, started yelling and screaming, was more angry about the people destroying my river than thinking about health issues. And as time went along, started doing more yelling and screaming and various things, and trying to get people evacuated. About 3 months after the spill, 2 months to be exact, I went and testified before Congress. When I came back, things happen when you're an activist. So one of my neighbors and another activist and myself had been trying to work on various issues, and a night came where there was a note left on my door. Hello, my name is John Bolenbaugh. Please contact me. And I was exhausted that night. I didn't. And the next morning, I was woken up by one of my neighbors pounding on my door, saying, "There's a body in the river, Michelle." And so we went running, and the neighbor who had seen the guy leave a note on my door said, "That looks like the guy that left you the note." So I started immediately dialing the number that had been left and met John afterwards. And no, he was not the body in the river.
And for everyone just joining this, we're talking about John Bolenbaugh, the whistleblower, as he goes, big oil whistleblower.
Right. And so then sat down and talked with him, and I was working with some people, and we were gathering stories of various residents along the river that were being severely impacted by the spill. And we started making videos. Those videos you see, most of the people I know, they are former neighbors and friends. Some of them are very close to me, even to this day. Some of them are no longer around. We were going to start a 501c3, and we ran into problems with that. So the videos, when you look at the videos, those people are not lying. The problem is some of those videos, the people do not wish.
So, and you're talking about John Bolenbaugh's video that he made his documentary with,
right?
Okay.
Some of those videos people did not want to be shown.
So and again, you're talking about the people in Michigan in the interview portions.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It's basically originally it was probably for legal reasons. If they settled with Enbridge, most of the people that settled had to sign what is called a non-disclosure.
And for everyone who doesn't know what Enbridge is,
Enbridge Energy is a pipeline company that spilled 1.1 million gallons into our river, probably more than that, to be frank, but and then completely trashed the Kalamazoo River. They are probably one of the world's largest companies. This is a multi-billion, multi-international company. And they play the games the same way all over the world.
So they had the oil spill. John comes to your door, and other activists are getting together to talk about the oil spill. John starts filming people who are involved in the oil spill, people who've become sick from it, and then what happens?
Some of them asked that they not be shown. And
The videos themselves, you mean?
The videos themselves, because they could be sued by Enbridge.
So to play devil's advocate, why would that be? Why wouldn't they want it shown if they're being filmed?
Because originally we didn't realize what we were up against. You know, I literally had an Enbridge land agent tell me, "Oh, we're just a little pipeline company. We don't know anything about spills." They're a $53 billion company, and they average a spill every few days.
And so you're saying basically what's happening is that some of these people that went on video with John Bolenbaugh, then they had court cases, and
Yep.
and then what happened when they realized that they were going to have to go to court and this is going to affect them?
They asked him to remove them or take them down.
And so what? And did John do that?
No.
No.
And some of them ended up settling with Enbridge. Some of them were endangered because of that. What people don't realize is when we do photography and videography of these situations, whether it is the Kalamazoo, it's DAPL, it's, right? Once they got your face and a name, they're going to connect it. I had residents that were followed and threatened to their homes.
So you're saying much like John Bolenbaugh says that Enbridge threatened him, Enbridge was threatening you and other people that were involved in the oil spill, other activists, and specifically other victims.
Correct.
So, and I know your husband is, for lack of a better way of saying it, he's one of the featured people. He may even be the star of John Bolenbaugh's documentary. Is that okay to talk about?
Sure. Tracy has seizures, and we knew that. And the day that was filmed, John did ask me, "Can I film it?" And I said yes, and we allowed him to film it. We did ask him to produce another video with what to do when there's a seizure. You see, My husband had seizures prior to the spill. What it did is it amped them up, meaning going from maybe 1 a week to 5. And Tracy, my husband, was not the only one. He was just one that had dealt with it for a long time. And as we did health surveys, started out of the legal process. And we found out that one of the major problems with an oil spill is seizures. A lot of people develop them. Some of them, they eventually go away. Most of them, they don't.
But still, just I want to be clear for anyone that's joining in here. Your husband's seizures were a pre-existing condition before John Bolenbaugh filmed him having a seizure for his documentary, John Bolenbaugh, Big Oil Whistleblower. Correct,
yeah. Tracy's had them since the age of 2. His is due to a head injury. What the chemicals do is they affect your brain, and a lot of people develop seizures. A lot of people, pets and animals, livestock. I don't know if you've ever seen the Fracking movie by Josh Fox.
Yep.
Where you see the animals having seizures. There you go. Right? That's what happens in an oil spill. So people had to learn how to deal with this. So we did a separate video in which we gave directions in how to do it.
To John or in general?
In general. Just so anyone that is... The reason behind the videos was twofold. One was to educate people, because we don't know how often these spills happen. So if you're in a state and you have an oil spill, we wanted people to be able to go and look up oil spill disaster, health effects, seizures, and see what to do. And that was part of the reason we did the videos.
I'm getting some questions I just want to throw in there, and we've kind of addressed it before, but I want to clarify it for everyone watching on the live stream. Are the seizures a direct result of the oil spill?
Tracy's seizures were pre-existing. They have amped up, meaning they have increased.
But so the answer is no. He had the seizures before the oil spill, just for the audience. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Most people, you saw one of two things. The people that already had some type of seizure disorder would see an increase. And then we would find people that had never had seizures and were developing them. And for me, that was the clicking point. I was doing research, and when you're trying to find out about a situation, you go and research other situations. The Gulf spill, there were people down there having seizures, so I contacted them and said, "Okay, what is this? Are you finding this?" I work with a lot of doctors and scientists and nurses that work with health issues. So that's how we kind of correlated it. And then, of course, I saw Fox's movie and went, crap, this isn't good. But yes, the chemicals in an oil spill cause seizures. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
And how close are you guys to the drinking water there, or not? How can you tell the audience how that's affected the situation?
In the Kalamazoo spill, where we lived, we were told we were not being exposed to any chemicals in the water because we were on city water. The people that were on well water, a lot of them developed health issues more so quickly. But it takes about, on average, when you have an oil spill, 10 years for the chemicals to drop down into your drinking table. We think we're seeing it at the 6 and 7 year. A portion of Battle Creek all of a sudden has arsenic levels increased in their drinking water, and they're now having to go on to city water. It is not something that happens quickly unless you have a very, very shallow well. And there were people that literally had wells that were only 25 or 50 feet deep.
And so do you want to talk about the situation with Corexit?
I had a scientist that teaches at George Mason University contact me. She had been in the Gulf studying the spill, and she came to Michigan and said, we want to know why people are sick so fast, because it took the Gulf people longer. Their spill was 70 miles out into the Gulf. Okay? Our spill was literally by our doors. Some people were less than 10 feet away from the oil, where their doors were. So she couldn't realize that there was how close we were. And in the low-lying areas along the river, I photographed and some videotape, but mainly photographed. This was before John came along. Foam. And we couldn't figure out where this stuff was coming from. Well, as time went by and we started doing more and more interviews, we found out from landowners and other residents that they would see trucks pulling up and dumping chemicals in. Literally, dump trucks worth of powdery stuff. And at first we thought it was sand and that they were trying to bury the oil. But sand doesn't really foam. And she looked at the photos and said, wait a minute, are they using chemicals on this? And we said, we don't know what chemicals. And so she explained to us about Corexit. I later contacted another scientist who dealt with the Exxon Valdez spill, and she was the one that really opened the eyes to them using chemicals. And then later, one of the activists' husbands went to the local park and asked about, noticed something strange going on in this park. And this was a park where they had completely dug it out and redone it. And so we went down there to see what was going on. And literally we had like little round things with little tiny animals crawling over them. And we couldn't figure out what that was. And I actually told John at that point that he needed to go film that. And he didn't. And another one of the activists did so. And then he took it upon himself to go and get it tested. And that is where we realized that we had the same chemicals that appear in Corexit. How it got there, we think it's, I will rephrase that.
Well, actually, but before you say that, do you want to tell people exactly, what the difference is with the Corexit?
Corexit is basically a chemical spray that they use on saltwater spills, right?
It was used in the Gulf, right?
Right,
yeah.
The Gulf. They just used it in the Gulf, the Exxon. Unfortunately, there's only 2 countries that allow this chemical. That would be the U.S. and Canada. And it is not allowed on fresh water, or had not until this past year, legally. So when we started seeing the foamy stuff, we started seeing the health issues. It sort of made us start comparing with some of the people in the Gulf on the same reactions, why we had people. When the EPA was telling us no chemicals were used. Now, we asked them in a public meeting, did you use any chemical dispersants? They said no. What you have to realize is what the terminology that you use. If you use terminology, you need to be very specific in dealing with governments, because they will not list Corexic as a dispersant always. It may be a suffocant, which basically means to the average person, here's the chemical, here's the oil on the water, boom, breaks it up, puts it through the entire water column of the table, sinks it to the bottom. So we got some of these rocks and we had them tested. And the chemical breakdown is the exact same mix as the Corexic. So if we can find a lawyer and sue, we'd love to. Any lawyers out there want to step up? You got about 4 months. It's one of those arenas that you have to be very, very careful of because of legalities, but it is one that needs to be stopped because it literally helps break down within the body, which is why you see oil cleanup workers become so ill.
So one of the first bits of activism that I heard related to this was one of the other activists who we mentioned who went into a pipe with a skateboard. This was one of the first actions? Am I correct? Am I getting that right?
First public action, yeah, and that would be a.
That's. I don't want to say his name if it's okay to say his name, right?
I think
that's Chris. It's Chris, yeah, it's Chris Wilmoff. Okay.
Him and some other activists from other areas came to me and said, we're going to climb into a pipeline. And I went, no, that's not smart. And they said, no, we're going to climb into the new pipeline. And so he did. He literally went into a pipeline that we believed to be the brand new one, which should have never, according to the laws, had any chemicals ran through it. We believe now that they had already been running stuff through it and testing it. And, that was one we've probably had 15 or 20 different arrests just on the new pipeline, line 6B.
And so what? I mean, beyond the fact that they stopped up the pipeline itself, was there any controversy around it?
The controversy around line 6B being replaced or around the activists.
Take your pick.
It's very difficult when a pipeline is already in the ground to fight back. And that's why a lot of us fight, because if they don't get that first one, then, in 5 years they can't add a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth, which they will do. I have landowners here who have 5 or 6 various pipelines running across their land. Minnesota, Wisconsin, same thing. These people were willing to give up their freedom and stand up and fight for other people to not have what happened to us happen to other citizens.
So,
And
but I mean, so I guess maybe the question is, what happened with Chris? I know that there was, it caused a lot of headlines to be caused, but not only that, in the activist community, a rift which caused some of these things that we were talking about at the start of our conversation between Chris Wamhoff and John Bolenbaugh, things that have become explosive and have led to some of the other. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just want to kind of direct you toward that.
basically, it was taken very badly by John, and when a person wakes up and realizes that they have to stand up, you don't judge them at that point. You know, I'm a little older than most of the activists in this fight, but sometimes it takes an awakening. And I have sat with activists who have planned things directly in front of me and seen other people take or try to take them apart because of that. And that's not acceptable to me. We've had that issue with John, and not just with Chris. I mean, literally it has happened to a lot of activists in our state. And for that reason, most of us will not work with John. Hence the letter.
And the letter, for those of you who don't know, Chris Wamhoff published something a few days ago, a list of the activists from your area, warning against some of the things that John had been up to. Do you want to mention briefly, just go down the bullet points in the list if you can remember?
Basically, it just said that the videos are true. We don't work with them. We feel that it came to a point where we felt we had to warn other organizations and groups. And I have I worked with John for over 2 years, and I was one of the last activists to work with him. Most of them had said, absolutely not, we're done. And I tried to ease things along and get people to work together. But there comes times when you can't work together. One of it was over money. One of it was having one of the young activists here, who was an activist before this started, organized a event, and to have someone come along and try to pull it out from underneath them is not acceptable. And we also had issues with money. The videos that you see were originally to set up a 501c3 for the residents, the people that were chemically poisoned by this company, and not to be made into a movie or game in any way. And it's just been those additional.
And I think that that was one of the points on Chris Wamhoff's post, is so that not only was there conflicts with the activists, he was hijacking some of the activist activities, and that the Michigan Against Tar Sands group was formed. That's My Cats, for those who don't know. And John had purchased the domain. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, and I didn't learn this.
But I mean, what was the rationale? He had purchased it, to his fundraising site.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. I want to make sure I was getting that right. But so it seems as though he's again. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll let you answer. So.
Well, let's put it this way: T-shirts, sweaters, GoFundMe's, and there's dozens and dozens of sites that activists use to raise money. I have had people that have tried to set up organizations, and not just when I did it, I mean other groups, and all of a sudden they wouldn't be able to get a domain name because someone else already had it. And that person ended up being John.
John Bolenbaugh.
And I walked away from him, I think it was about 3 years ago. But we literally, the MyCats were their own organization, pure and simple. They weren't connected to John in any way. And so for someone to throw up a page or a website and get donations, and I noticed it, that he had the no dapple lies. You know, it's not acceptable. If you're going to do work, do it on your own, pure and simple.
So, okay.
And you know, we're fighting a multi-billion-dollar company or companies. Depends on who you are and what type of activism. We don't need to have to deal with crap like that. And literally 2 years ago, when we had the Remember the Kalamazoo issue, you know, there was 6 or 8, maybe 10 groups working on it. We made the decision up front we would not include John. John has his own event in Battle Creek. And we invited everyone. We finished with the day. It went beautifully. We had a great event. Hopefully a lot of people learned and took that home to start other fights. But one of the guys mentioned to me after the day, he said, go put up the signs. And John had taken his signs and posted them up on the light fixtures of the parking lot. It was little things like that he does that we don't stand with, and we will not stand with. There's respectability, respecting other activists' work is important. And you don't steal it. And, I mean, I've watched this go on and on and on. And we actually had discussed the letter before the issue with you and North Dakota had ever, and we had decided we would just ignore the situation, and we've attempted to do so, and just quietly notify people one-on-one, you need to be careful if you're going to deal with John. And we were in the middle of drafting the letter, and you popped up on the radar. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
It's nothing compared to what you've had to go through. Nothing. But
there are stories. A lot of them, sadly. And that's why we went public.
Yeah, and it's Chris had spoken to me a little bit about a week ago, and some of the other activists. The hardest thing that I find about this issue, I mean, at least in dealing with John and getting that part out there, you don't want to detract negatively from the movement. So whether it's Michigan or whether it's Standing Rock, John went on the offensive with me over nothing, really. I'd called him out in private about a couple of things that I took issue with. There was the rubber bullets that he was claiming that he'd been shot with, and that just wasn't a thing. And I know that because I was on the bridge on the night of the water cannons at Standing Rock, and I asked him if he was okay, and because we drove back in the same van together, and he said he was all right. Then in an interview a couple days later, I heard he starts elaborating on his story, and I had a look of horror on my face, and he comes and whispers to me afterwards, and he says, hey man, just go along with it, because if it seems like I got hurt, then it'll make my story better, and people will be drawn to the cause. And I mean, I was so in shock when he said this to me that, well, first of all, I didn't want to make a scene in front of the interviewers. I didn't want this to I just there were so many. There was real life danger. Sophia Walensky had her arm blown up. Vanessa Dundon had her eye shot out. Susie, she goes by, there were over 300 cases of hypothermia. The last thing that I wanted to do was bring negative attention to what was going on in Standing Rock, but so what do you do in a situation like that? You try to sit back, and I see that that's exactly what you did. You wait until the right moment to say it, and I saw just some of the things that are going on, and it was a poster that was going out with the heroes of Standing Rock going out on it, and John being on the list there, which is that's not the end of the world. It's not that big a deal, but things have calmed down, for lack of a better way of saying it, and so. And the situation is changing. It's moved out into the world, and this is not about trying to put down other activists. This is, you guys put out a warning, and it was your prompt. You're telling me about your warning that made me feel like it was time. It was time for me to speak about it too, because if it wasn't for the fact I know Chris talked about him gambling, and there's a video that John had published himself on YouTube, so that's not a secret. But it might be not common knowledge to some people. Going out and gambling is something that John would do at Standing Rock all the time, and I'd say, "Hey man, you can't do that. That's going to look bad, especially when you're taking big donations." He's like, "No, it's just for fun. It's just," and I'm like, I didn't know him, so I thought maybe he was being truthful, and it's just a one-time thing. But then it happened again and again and again, and I don't know if it's even important to talk about these things again. I don't want it to. I don't want it to come across like It's a put down, but I believe that there should be a warning. I don't know if you can elaborate on that.
I feel a lot of guilt because what people know me, I'm a big mouth. And some of the people in the activist circles know me because of pipelines and car stands. What people don't know is my husband and I are very busy social media-wise. My husband is one of the top tweeters. I don't know about the statistics, but
sure.
He gets things out.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that we try and do for good causes, good activists that are doing honest work. And way back when this started, that was what I did a lot of to support John and bring some fame. And then I stopped, and the issue came up for me was after he went to do a talk in another state. And this did not just happen once, it happened multiple times, where I had organizers and other activists go, "What is wrong with this picture?" And we had to literally make decisions on whether or not to continue working with him. And I told him straight out, I said, "You need to be accountable for the money that these people are giving you. You need to be accountable." And one of the activists that no longer works with John was laughing because in one of the videos he says, "I've never asked for money," and that has been from day one. All of us have supported him, and we have supported him in ways, financially, helping with videos, bailing him out of jail. We've helped send him on other trips. We've introduced him to other activists. I'll be very frank. I saw what was happening with yours, and I had to step back and not say anything for a while because I promoted some of the people in Standing Rock, you and Kevin and Myron and another young kid, and some of the women that some of them I've actually met in tours that I have done in the past or at different events. so I tried to be very, very careful, and I had to sit back and I had to analyze. And once we started seeing what was going on with you, we already had partially drafted the letter. One of the things that one of the activists said to me, it's been about the money from day one. And I will tell you, and anyone who is watching, because I just realized we're live, I forgot, and not just having...
Well, yeah, I mean, we should maybe recap that what you're talking about is what happened with me is that John was publicly attacking me because I'd called him out on a couple of things. He was doing false editing in some of his videos, and he was lying about being shot with rubber bullets. And it's just when you're falsifying things like that, then it brings into question the real videos that John might have done.
Yes.
Am I right?
And that hurts every activist out there.
Of course.
Whether it's you, whether it's me, whether it's... and I've seen that happen here with a couple of other videographers. I've had literally 4 filmmakers walk away from doing a film about our spill because of John.
Jeez. That's the horrible real life consequences of someone behaving like this, like John.
Yes, and the other thing is putting people in danger.
Yeah.
Well, go over there and talk to that pipeline person, right? And or that cop, and distract them. Fighting back against a pipeline is a noble thing. You are fighting for the water. You are fighting for people's lives. To falsify it is not acceptable because the other side goes, look, there's this idiot and he's lying. And then it hurts the rest of us.
And I had to say, for the record, and I'm going to say it again for the record, I want no association with a person like that. I want no association with John Bolenbaugh for his falsified editing, for his lying about the rubber bullets, for making it seem like your husband's seizures were a direct result of the oil spill, which, again, you say it increases it. But the way that John put it on his video was that, I believe his words, this is because of Enbridge, this is because of the oil spill. And it's not, and you explained that earlier, but I feel as though that is a point which needs recapping. It can't be mentioned enough.
It has to be above call. And you know, I made friends with a lot of these people. And I continue to be friends with a lot of these people. And when you look at the signatures, you see family names. And some of those are John's family members. He took video that should have never been taken and used it. And
it's affecting people's real cases. So they might have gotten settlements. They might have been able to get some money for their health issues. And as John has pointed out, and this is the problem. You know, some people have died. Some people have leukemia. Some people have horrible real issues. And because John took these videos and he published them when people asked, you know, like yourself, not to use the video in his documentary, now it's causing real life, you know, problems that they can't get the money for their health issues.
It's not even about the money. It's about...
it's the health, right? I mean, yeah.
And, you know, I ended up moving 45 miles away. Part of that was due to having a big mouth and speaking out and being in videos, and I'm not just talking about John's big mouth, okay? I accept that. But when I have friends that still live there that walk into the store and they go, oh, you're the person in that video. I still have a couple of people who have Enbridge show up and park across the street from their homes. Right? And we're talking almost 7 years later. Just to say, hey, we're still here. We haven't gone away. These types of things happen to real people. And
I think that's how we started our conversation together. Because I had reached out, and I think there was kind of some back and forth, and you'd seen I'd published something on Facebook. I was worrying about my safety, and I remember you had a lot of pointers for me as to how to protect myself. And it's really no joke when people end up following and they say you're paranoid, but things happen for real. I was basically kidnapped by the DAPL workers, hogtied in the road, and then they call the police on me, and I'm the one that goes to jail for it. This is, I mean, like George Carlin said, the United States is an oil company with an army, and or in some cases a police force. But at times you have to ask yourself, what's the difference when they can do whatever they want to do? And you've had it happen to you. I've been raided by the FBI and Homeland Security and ICE agents. What does ICE have to do with anything?
People do not realize this, and in the last 24 hours, we've had some chemicals show up on beaches in Michigan, and we've had some chemicals spilled in Indiana, and a lot of people know me, so someone sent me this woman's video, and I was really concerned because she's exposed herself to it. And that is one of the things that people need to realize is you don't know what you're dealing with. This can be dangerous stuff. Chris,
Chris Blumhoff
the first time was all of us that were activists along the river would take various groups out and show them what was going on. Whether it was NBC, CBS, it didn't matter. Anyone we could get to try and draw attention to what was going on, we would bring in. And Chris, John friended him. I didn't know Chris. And he took him into the river, and I see this young man going into the river barefoot, bare-legged. We're not talking no boots, no protective gear, nothing. And I literally called John up and said, "What the are you doing? You don't do this." That guy's now been exposed. Chris now has serious health issues that he has to deal with. It wasn't a one-time exposure, okay? But any exposure to these chemicals does not help. And Chris actually that day had dropped his cell phone into the water and was asking how to drain it. And I said, "You put it in a box of rice." And I said, "You need to make sure that you take a serious bath and don't go into the river without boots, without protective gear." And this is something that's very serious. And
I think it should be noted that the disease that he's contracted as a result of that is basically a crippling condition. He walks with a cane now. It's a skin disease with a very long name, which I did not write down, so I cannot repeat it at the moment. But from his description, it's very painful, and he describes it like tight bumps all over his skin where he was in contact with the oil affected water. Is that right? Yeah.
It's the really serious thing is at the start of this, a lot of us didn't know what we were dealing with. And even once we knew that it was tar sand oil, right, we didn't realize. It took us a couple of years to learn to deal with it and learn how serious it was. And that is one of the things that, you'll see John go into a river and he has protective gear on. When Mayflower happened, I started seeing videos of people dipping their hand into these chemicals without gloves. And I'm like, don't do that.
Well, I mean, John knows better. He was an oil worker. I mean, he worked for SET, right?
Yeah. But even oil workers don't sometimes realize how serious these chemicals are. And it takes educating them on what they are being exposed to, how they're being exposed to it, for them to take it serious. Most oil workers have no clue of what they're dealing with. And once you sit down and you explain to them, this and this and this and this is what you're being exposed to, that's when it gets serious.
And again, that's why it's important to note all this, that obviously he was with Chris when Chris went into the water, and John's not telling him to get back. And again, real life consequences. Now Chris has a crippling disease.
Yeah, I've actually, if I had to go back and do it all again, and when we started realizing how serious it was, and what exactly was going on, whether it was you were being followed by cleanup workers or being set up by people that were pro-oil, we took it extremely serious at that point. But by that point, it was too late. Most of us had already been tromping through the woods or along the river or through the water. And I feel some guilt for that, you know. I took hundreds of people. And most of us that did that now have health issues that, you know, are consequences of that.
Well, I know at Standing Rock, everyone had what they called the camp cough, which was from the CS gas, and I had it for weeks myself, and not as bad as some of the people. Some of the folks got really big lungs full of chemical gas, and that's another big issue, obviously because of the gas attacks in Syria, but the Trump administration and Trump himself saying that, well, the U.S. government would never gas its own citizens. And of course, there they are at Standing Rock. I know it happened at the inauguration. The U.S. government gases its own citizens all the time. And I feel that I don't have my full lung capacity anymore. But I went there fully knowing that they were making gas attacks there. I guess if it was more serious, for me, some of the folks like Chris Wamhoff, who's got the skin disease now, one might ask themselves, was it worth it to go to that extent? Because he was simply walking in the water. In my case, I was, trying to get closer to the police so I can film them so that the world knows that this is happening. So would I do it again? My answer to that is I'm wary when I'm closer to the cops because it is affecting my health. Would I take back what I did? No, I still would have done it. And I don't know if you need to wrap it up. I see that someone else is in the room there, but
Tracy just walked in.
Oh, okay. Hi, Tracy.
Hey. He said, "Hey."
How you doing?
He walked in. One of the things is, and I preach a lot on safety of activists, and I did reach out to you because I saw that threat that you received. One, we get enough threats from the idiots that be, whether they be cleanup workers, oil workers, police, security. We don't need them from other activists. Two, chemical exposure is a really serious thing for me because I've spent the last 6 years studying it and seeing what it does to human beings. And it's not acceptable. And I've had a lot of friends that have been exposed to tear gas or various chemicals at events. And it is always a serious thing. And it ticks me off to no belief. When it comes to oil spills, there's a bunch of us activists, whether we're from the Gulf, whether we're from Michigan, Mayflower, Alaska, that will hop on when we see a spill happening and try and warn people, get out of the area. Most of the people that I deal with that are very ill because of our spill didn't even touch this stuff. They just breathed it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is something that is really insidious, and that ticks me off because people have no clue. And it's one of the reasons why I still fight pipelines, because I know what it can do to your community. Period.
Absolutely, it's some horrible stuff. But I don't know. I don't want to keep you all day. So I guess the question is there anything that you think that people should know? Is there anything that we need to get out to the universe, which needs hearing that we haven't already covered?
Stop the pipeline, stop the fracking, stop the wars. It basically comes down to this. We that call ourselves activists, I quite often will say, do it with love. And there comes times when we are activists, whatever type of activists you are, that when you see another activist acting up, you smack them upside the head, Gibbs style. Boom. Just a nice little tap on the head. And stop and think about what you are doing. And I deal with this a lot. I've seen it happen in other states, other organizations. A lot of activists have seen it happen. We're fighting something bigger than ourselves. We don't need to be fighting each other. And if you can't play nicely, some of us aren't going to play with you because we have things to get done. And that was one of the reasons we did the letter, is because the stories were out there and people would call you up and go, is this going on? Is this true? Is this not? There it is. It's out in the public now.
Yeah, I think in regard to that, a lot of folks were getting hung up on, and again, it's out there. This will be the first time that I've even uttered the words, but his sex offender status is out there, and that's addressed, and a lot of people dwell on that. And obviously, we haven't talked about it at all in this conversation. I don't know how long we've been talking. I've talked about it to people in private, but again, it makes you question the official story that he puts out there, or just anyone. When you engage in falsified editing, when you engage in lying, and when you engage in any of these kind of things, it makes you wonder about what's going on with everything. So, and for those who don't know, John Bolenbaugh, who we're talking about there, is a registered sex offender. He went to jail for 8 years, according to the court record, for having sex with 2 minors between the ages of 13 and 15. The way that he made it sound was that that he was in college and that they were the high end of teenagers as opposed to, to the low end. And then he starts getting into the whole victim shaming thing. And even in the court record, he accuses the girls of giving him herpes. This is and other stories that I've heard from female activists. I don't want to, I'm not a woman, so I maybe I should, I'll let you speak to that if that's something that you want to get off your chest. But
I had anyone that knows me knows I am a person that does not deal well with certain crimes: sexual abuse, domestic violence, and children's abuse, period. And I had a very, very, very difficult time once I found out the issue with John, on whether I could personally try and a friend of mine who's a well-known activist said to me, everyone deserves a second chance. And I thought, okay, I questioned that, but I attempted to work with him. You can tell there's obviously been a lot of issues, but he went to another state and was doing some talks, and someone brought up his past, and he turned around and attacked him and did the exact same thing that you're talking about the victims in a poor way. And that was, for me, the point at which I could no longer work with him.
Yeah.
You know,
and that was, I'll let you finish, sir.
There's certain issues that you can deal with, and you can question, and but you don't blame victims, and you don't blame other people that are trying to do something good. And people have asked me about John. Well, don't you think he's trying to do something good? Yes, but then you would stop and you would make some changes.
And you got to question the motives. Sorry, I talked over.
He has not made those changes, and that was evident by attacks on you and a couple other activists, and that's why we came forward with the letter in the website.
Yeah, it was, and that was the thing. With the attacks on me, it was he was flat out accusing me of the very things that he was doing, which was utterly absurd. And I had the video evidence to refute that. And what he did was very Trumpian. He is a Donald Trump supporter too, which is another weird thing that might tip you off. But he says to his audience, his followers on Facebook, not to go to Rod Weber's videos because he profits from his YouTube channel. And there's slight truth to that. I make a very small amount of money off of there. But someone clicking on one of my videos would bring me a profit of maybe 1/10 of a cent. I'm not. So this person. I'm going to just chime in because people are asking questions. Glenn Myers here is asking, is this a he said, she said video? Well, how do you... Go ahead.
I would suggest that anyone that is questioning it, go read the letter. Those are names of people that are willing to be public about it. I can tell you there are names on that are not on that list, that are not willing. And for us, it is issuing a warning. You can either work with someone or not work with someone, but there comes a time when people need to... We tried the silent thing, okay? We tried ignoring the issue. We tried distancing ourselves from the issue and could no longer do so.
And Glenn, if you watched a little bit of the earlier in the video, I did address some of this. Terry Buffalohead wants to know where the letter is, and I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I guess we'll tag that afterwards in the comment section. Maybe if someone who's watching has a link to the letter, that would be great. But no, this is not a he said, she said thing. In fact, me and, for instance, Chris Wamhoff and Michelle, who we're talking to right now, I stayed out of it for months. In the case of Michelle and Chris, they stayed out of this for years. They tried to stand back from this issue because we didn't want it to negatively affect the community. We didn't want it negatively affecting Standing Rock or the Michigan activists. But the fact of the matter is, John purchased the My Cats website to forward it to his money, to his fundraiser campaign. You can go there right now, mycats.org, MICATS.org. I mean, the proof positive is right there. This is not a he said, she said thing. In fact, when I remained silent, John started doing more and more videos against me. And so what I did, I took my videos in John's own words, him lying back and forth, lying, old like Jon Stewart Daily Show style, showing his lies in his own words. the idea that this is a he said, she said, I don't like that notion at all. We're doing these videos now because it's the appropriate time to warn people about this. And I know that Chris has gone on the record with me. We did an audio recording, which my plan was to put on YouTube. But now that we're doing the live streams, perhaps maybe Chris will do a live stream with me so more people can see it direct, unedited, face-to-face. This is not a he said, she said situation. The facts are being gathered, and we're putting it out there because people need to be warned about the situation. So again, go to mycats.org, MICATS.org. You can see that this is John purchasing their website to funnel money to himself.
And there are other organizations listed on that page, and the same or similar things have been done to them. So it's not just one. It's not just me. It's not just you. It's a lot of people, and that is why we did the letter.
And I can say, secondly, if you go to youtube.com/Rod Weber, you can see my video with John Bolenbaugh and those lies back to back to back to back. And I also include a clip of his false editing. My cats, not Micah. Someone's commenting on here. MICATS.org. But yes, you got it now. But the thing is, this is not a he said, she said issue. This is the information is out there. It's easily verifiable, and this is why I had silently said my only response to all of this was Google it. The truth is out there. Google it. The truth is out there. And it's all over the place. You just have to be willing to look for it. And we will put links to all of this in the comments section afterwards. And it was maybe 20 minutes ago when I said we could wrap it up. I know that you have other things that you must need to do. And when I get talking, I can talk too much. So I don't want to keep you all day. But yep, so Kevin Gilbert just posted my cats. And Kevin had another question a while back. And I'm trying to see if I can find it here. It says, ask, the spill in Benton Harbor was not an oil spill, but an iron slag washed up from the storms. Do you know anything about that?
That is something that someone sent me yesterday, and we posted on to Facebook. It is a U.S. Steel down in Indiana apparently did a spill. A young lady in the Benton Harbor, St. Joseph area, which is in Michigan, found some stuff on the beach, and someone sent it to me because they know I do a lot of research. So we're waiting to hear. If he's saying it's iron slag, it's a possibility. We're trying to get some independent testing done. But
okay,
anything's possible. That's why we do what we do, is to try and protect our water. Michigan, we have not only our spill in the Kalamazoo River, we have a line that is 65 years old underneath the Mackinac Bridge, which would contaminate 2 lakes. We have a 99-year-old pipeline in Lake Huron. This is what we fight. And if you don't want what happened to my community to happen to yours, join in on the fight, wherever you are, because they're trying to put these pipelines in everywhere.
Yep. You've got the Diamond Pipeline down in Oklahoma and Texas. You got Lancaster in Pennsylvania. And Kevin is saying he's confirming that he just did come from Michigan, and he says U.S. Steel is wastewater spill, nothing to do with that. Was there with the Director of Natural Resources of Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. Okay, so we got that, but the important thing is that we're getting the word out there and protecting the water, and hopefully tell the Trump administration not to keep their heads too far up their posteriors. I won't hold my breath on that one, but as we know, because of what happened at Standing Rock, I have a shortage of breath anyhow. Not so much that you can stop me from talking. I will keep talking, and I know you will keep talking. You're a self-professed big mouth, And Allie's saying that there's something going on in Connecticut. I know there's one in West Roxbury, Massachusetts. There's probably one in every state in the union. I know that there's 250 million miles, or at least that's the figure that I've read, of pipeline across the U.S. And to any of those doubters that say, why is this a big issue now? Well, it's because the modern ways that oil is taken out. It's the tar sands, that peanut buttery substance, they got to thin it down with chemicals. And when you've got a 1.5% allowance of pressure change before any of those alarms go off, well then of course there's going to be a lot of poisons leaking through in a pipe that's pumping through 500,000 gallons of whatever nasty things it is that they're pumping. So let's end on that note. Just let's all protect the water, get the word out. Is there any last thing you want to say?
Protect the water, people. It's the only thing you got to drink.
All right.
All the other stuff comes from that water.
That's right.
Coffee, you got water in it.
There you go. Protect the water.
Nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you too. Mini Wichoni.